Why does nobody look at me the way that he looks at corn?
Khrushchev and Garst discussed the relative merits of American and Russian corn.
Nikita Khrushchev's American tour swings into the world's best corn country. On the Coon Rapids, Iowa farm of Roswell, Garst.
Why were the Soviets, and in particular, Nikita Khrushchev, obsessed with this stuff? There are posters and pictures and monuments to glorify corn. And can we stop the Russian music? Thank you. I thought that this story was just funny. One weird man's obsession, but it is way bigger than that.
The quality hybrid, a leader whose nation has long known major food production problems.
The surest way to happy harvest.
It touches on branching paths in plant genetics, an Iowa farmer who became a de facto international diplomat, a summit in the middle of Iowa with souvenir corn and intrigue.
We trailed these two food tasters, did not let them out of our sight for that entire hour.
And it changed my perspective on the Cold War by helping me understand why this man loved corn.
The American agricultural efficiency that is perhaps Russia's greatest envy.
The poster actually has a message that I totally overlooked, but Aaron decoded it for me really quickly. You see this? You know this one?
Yeah. I've seen this one before. It's a jam.
Aaron literally wrote a book about the Corn Crusade, and he set the stage for me too.
He was running a race from behind with a GDP the size of France and a population much, much bigger.
Yeah.
As Americans, I don't claim to fully grasp the material, psychological, social effects of World War II on Soviet society. It's massive.
Nikita Khrushchev led the USSR from 1953 to 1964. His country had been devastated not only by World War II, but by Stalinism. Taking farms from private to public, collectivization, had caused a famine in the early 1930s, and that was followed by another famine. It seems like there were two main types of farms that existed.
A sovkhoz is a state farm, basically. So it's owned by the state, run by the state, more or less directly. All the produce belongs to the state.
Right.
The flip side of that is then the collective farms, or again, the Russian is collectivное хозяйство, or literally collective farm. And so that goes as kolkhoz. They get a little less extreme with some of Khrushchev's forms, but they are nominally owned by the members, run by the members on democratic line. Like, it sounds nice, okay. The reality is none of that is true.
Yeah. The key here is that Khrushchev was running all of this. In 1953, Time magazine put him on the cover with wheat, the symbol of traditional Russian agriculture. They underscored his challenges: a shortage of cattle, a decline in pork, and a drop in butter production. He wanted to fix this through big agricultural projects. A virgin lands campaign focused largely in Kazakhstan, but through to Western Siberia. This was a huge and somewhat crazy campaign. Let me show you. Okay, so here is Iowa, and here is the USSR. Now this is a simplified illustration, but let's drag over Iowa here. This area is huge, 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 huge. He thought corn could uniquely accomplish this as sausage on the stalk. This is from a later CIA report on Soviet corn mania, and this also explains what my poster means.
Like, doroga is a way or a road, and then the sign says to the farm. The implication here is, right, those are all the animals that are going to be fed on corn and fattened up.
He gave a big speech saying that corn should increase 8-fold by 1960. And he highlighted that the United States was corn crazy already. And where do they grow a lot of the corn? Iowa. The Des Moines Register published an op-ed telling Mr. Khrushchev if he wanted more meat, he should ask Iowa for help. Of course, the Russians wouldn't do it, the op-ed said. Well, so I just want, this is
That's
you.
me.
That's you, yes.
Yeah, that's me.
It's so funny to just have I have this picture of you in my little studio now. So can you tell me what is happening here? I mean, what?
That's Mrs. Khrushchev kissing my forehead.
That's Liz Garst, and she's really a 2-for-1 because she was on the farm when Khrushchev visited, and she's an agricultural economist. When I saw these photos, I assumed they were a photo op, like state fair photos you see. But really, they were the culmination of a multi-year integration of American and Soviet agriculture. Can you tell me a little bit about who your grandfather was and what his impact was?
So my grandfather was a real pioneer in agricultural technology. He grew up in Coon Rapids. His parents sent him to college 5 times, but he kept sneaking back to the farm to continue experiments in agriculture.
I knew you were here to find out the how and why of hybrid corn, and how and why you could put more money in your pocket.
He was a very, very early adopter of hybrid seed corn, which really revolutionized the Corn Belt. Early leader in promoting the use of machinery in the Midwest, use of nitrogen fertilizer.
This is key to understanding why corn in particular was Khrushchev's obsession, because corn had become a much better product over the preceding decades. On the left, we have normal corn, say around 1920 in the United States. See how the heights were different, the sizes were irregular? In America, they improved that by making hybrid corn, corn 2.0. Through genetics, it was bred to be better.
Stalk. The ears are at a uniform height, and the stalks are standing up, stiff, straight, and strong.
Look at this video of mechanized versus hand picking. Americans also supercharged their corn and got a lot more out of each corn plant by using these stalks and cobs for silage to feed animals. Roswell Garst, Liz's granddad, really led the charge on hybrid corn, along with people like Henry Wallace, another corn pioneer. So now you see why Khrushchev was so laser focused on corn. Corn 2.0 had changed the course of the 20th century, and Khrushchev was convinced that it could change the fate of his country. That Des Moines Register op-ed came out and, well, they won the Pulitzer for it. This bragging ad explains why. That op-ed actually inspired the Russians to send a delegation to Iowa and the Americans to send a delegation to Russia. The CIA released this map of the farmer delegation's route through Russia. You can see that the Virgin Lands areas are also marked. And the Russians went to Iowa.
Soviet delegation, not including Khrushchev, but a Soviet delegation has come to Iowa to tour ag at the invitation of Iowa State University, who asked the Farm Bureau to pick out farms to show the delegation. The Farm Bureau then, Politico, wanted to show the delegation only farms with no hired labor.
So basically, initially, they're looking for collective-style farms. Like they would have in Russia, right? Like that's sort of their political.
Well, they don't know what they're looking for. They don't have a clue of what they're looking for, really. But so Roswell gets to the head of the delegation and says, you should come see my farm. It's not as big as your farm, but at least it's on a scale where you could consider, how it might work. And you should come see my farm because I've got state-of-the-art technology. And you're being sold old-fashioned stuff. Shortly after the delegation returned to the Soviet Union, a letter came from Khrushchev directly to Roswell, inviting him to go to the Soviet Union to sell them hybrid seed corn.
Roswell Garst became the guy teaching the Soviets how to use hybrid corn. Garst started showing up in Pravda, the state Russian newspaper. He was talked about in the United States, too. President Eisenhower heard from the Russian delegation that Garst was their main contact. He became an international corn celebrity. Garst wrote directly to Nikita himself, "If we whip the problems of production of useful things on a worldwide basis, what a happy world it would be." And all of that led to Nikita Khrushchev's incredible visit to Coon Rapids, Iowa, so that he could see Roswell Garst's farm for himself.
As one of the most jovial and folksy days of his visit. One of the world's most modern, efficient, and profitable farming operations, Khrushchev shows an enthusiasm springing from his Ukrainian peasant background.
In 1959, Nikita Khrushchev, his wife, and their entourage left Des Moines and headed for the Garst farm in Coon Rapids.
It was a wonderful day, and I was old enough to sort of remember quite a bit about it.
The horde of newsmen and photographers pressing in provided a raucous science show to the main event. Farmer Garst and his staff angrily tried to repel the press, Garst actually hurling silage at a group of reporters as Khrushchev looks on.
You were able to follow around some food tasters?
Oh, you're right to how bad I am. I have some sweet-eyed little girl, 8-year-old girl stories, but you're right to my darker nature.
But that's so cool. I mean, a food taster, you know, you don't even think that's real.
But first you have to know there's huge security around all of this, you know. It's real fear someone's going to assassinate Khrushchev in a fit of patriotism or something. So like my grandma grew all the food, but it had to be cooked under armed guard. So she grows all the food. It goes to the Sky Room at the airport in Des Moines, cooked under a National Guard supervision and brought back to the farm to be served. They had one Soviet and one American food taster taste each dish an hour before lunch to make sure it was not poisoned. And we were told that, my brother, my cousin, and I, these 3 little kids, we trailed these 2 food tasters, did not let them out of our sight for that entire hour, praying they would die of food poisoning, choking ourselves, landing on the ground, demonstrating what death by food poisoning looked like. It didn't happen. But the thought...
In another skirmish, one of Garst's many mechanized farming devices hurled down silage on the press. Throughout the day, it was filled with the bustle, confusion, and the air of near riot that has marked most of Khrushchev's tour.
You also interacted with Nina Khrushchev probably the most out of the visitors.
I liked her. She smelled good. She didn't hold me too tight. But not too much later, I was in a scuffle with one of my grandfather's partner's grandkids who was there for part of the day. And Mrs. Khrushchev was just wandering around the yard and caught us fighting and got us both by our collars and her finger right in our face. The little brothers and sisters said fight. Really shaking her finger at us in a real babushka kind of way.
Okay, so I said that this visit was not a photo op, and that is true, but there is an interesting bit of trivia about some of the photos. Do you see this guy? This was a guy who snuck in to the summit at Garst Farm. He Forrest Gumped himself through history. It's a fascinating story, but it's too much of a digression for this video. I tell the full story in my newsletter article this week. If you don't know, I have a newsletter over on Patreon. It's totally free to subscribe to, and it lets me share extra stuff from the video that I couldn't quite fit in, and that is the hilarious story that I get to tell this week, how this guy snuck into the summit on Garst Farm. He got his tummy patted by Nikita. So yeah, go ahead and check that out if you want to learn more about him. So amidst all of this chaos and this incredible exchange, they were selling feed and machinery, they were trading knowledge, and the Soviets were getting the best of agricultural know-how. The visit that Khrushchev made to Garst Farm quickly became Soviet propaganda, and a symbol that it was okay to use American ideas for Soviet advancement. So the natural question then is, did it work?
Garst has pioneered in high-yield hybrid corn, some of which has been bought by the Soviet, an effort towards the goal of more and better food for Russia.
A huge treat for me was when I went to the old farmhouse and was able to meet Roswell Garst's widow, and she let me sign the guest book.
Yeah.
And the guest book had all of the names of these people who had been on Soviet delegations. I mean, I didn't know that there were people who came and stayed for weeks or months at a time.
Laura was another visitor to Garst Farm. She is now a super reporter on Iowa politics, but at the time she was working on her thesis, which is all about the scientific debates that were going on about corn in the Soviet Union. Together, she and Aaron helped break down for me what went wrong with Khrushchev's corn plan. On the science front, that breeding diagram, it seems obvious to us, but plant genetics wasn't undisputed in the USSR, and that slowed down the science. The chief scientist in charge of all this stuff, Trofim Lysenko, his philosophy, dubbed Lysenkoism, rejected genetics in favor of his own ideas. This naturally affected plant breeding. For example, he thought that growing plants differently, in harsher regions or with different fertilizers, could affect their offspring. This conflict between modern hybrid genetics and Lysenkoism is this big rift that is kind of slowing down progress.
There was this optimistic view of progress that they could do without following the Western way. And so, I mean, I just love the idea that you just plant a bunch of corn plants close together and the plant will just choose to pollinate with the most advantageous plant to pollinate with. I mean, or if we just plant farther north, then the seeds are going to become more tolerant to cold, and it's going to all work out better for us.
Lysenko was pushed out in 1956, but his influence remained hard to overcome.
Then when you think also about all the people who suffered from hunger over the many years in the Soviet Union, it was such a disaster.
That impeded Khrushchev, as did a populace that was less willing to do what he wanted than you might think. He's just herding cats.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Sort of the conventional wisdom sense is like, well, Khrushchev said, so it must have happened. And then you start looking and it's like, oh no. It's chaos. It's absolutely chaos.
There's this one crazy example where it's like, somebody's coming out, they're gonna inspect, and they like tie a giant pole to the side of a tractor or something to like make it look like they've plowed everything.
The party boss is like, yeah, we've overfilled the corn plant. Harvest was supposed to have been done like months ago. It's like December. This should have been done in October. But then they realized that there's lots of corn still standing out there because they didn't bother to harvest it because it didn't grow. And so their solution was, if I remember correctly, they went to the rail yard and requisitioned big long rails and dragged them behind a tractor just to knock it down. So at least from a distance, you couldn't tell that it hadn't been harvested properly.
They really did increase a massive area sown to corn, but it fell far short of expectations. The corn was such a focus and obsession, but the support systems for the corn often fell short of what was needed to make the crop thrive.
Right. I mean, they just didn't have the resources. This was a frustrating thing for Garst because he thought they needed to be investing more, but they just didn't have the resources to do everything that you would need to do for corn with the mechanization and the fertilizer particularly.
As Khrushchev left power, corn production started to sink. In many places, his favorite crop was junked to go back to wheat.
Khrushchev shows an enthusiasm springing from his Ukrainian peasant background and the interest of a leader whose nation has long known major food production problems.
I was attracted to this story because I thought the picture was funny, but I learned that it is a bigger story about the ways in which systems can fail ideas. Now, to be clear, I think the geography was a big determining factor in this. Russia's really cold.
Common joke of this era is Mrs. Khrushchev. You know, your husband's planting corn every place but on the moon. And Mrs. Khrushchev says, shh, don't give him the idea.
It was just an overemphasis given that not every area is best suited to growing corn. Even in the U.S., I mean, think about the plain states where they're basically growing wheat, not corn. When you don't have abundant rainfall, it doesn't make as much sense to grow corn. Like in Iowa is mostly planted with corn and soybeans, but that's not the best crop for every place.
But there is a meaningful story about the failure of communism to deliver wealth to the Soviet people.
The ship of state turns slowly, especially when it's the Soviet Union, right? It's like trying to turn around the Titanic and, the rudder's broken, right? Like the system was really good at some things. There's nothing here. We're going to funnel a bunch of people and resources. And in 3 years, you have a massive steel complex. You have a car factory. You have aircraft production. You have a nuclear program, whatever. Really bad then is taking existing production facilities or existing things and making them better, improving efficiency.
I'm not confident enough in my American corn policy knowledge to totally just cheerlead for the United States. We have problems here too. There was a big farm crisis in the 1980s, and Liz Garst has actually turned her land into a conservancy to try to change the way that agriculture is done on big industrial farms.
There have been evolutions of understanding about agriculture and farming. My grandfather, who promoted, modern commercial farming techniques, lived in such a different world than I live in. He lived in a world where soils were depleted and we didn't use fertilizer. So I live in a world where soils are depleted and we use way too much.
I am confident, however, that this story, it matters. It reveals richer and more complex history than what we normally focus on. It shows how the Cold War ebbed and flowed, and there were moments in which the Soviets were willing to accept and embrace American technological advancements, and the Americans were willing to give it to them for a price and also to better secure global stability. Two men met on a farm to talk about corn. And even if it didn't work out exactly the way that they expected, they changed the world by doing it. All right, that's it for this one. Thank you for being here and watching this. Thank you to everyone who talked to me for this video. It was a real kick to learn about that. I've got a reaction video up on Patreon. That's kind of where I give you the director's commentary, all the stuff that I left out of the main video you get to hear about there. I also have the newsletter over there that I mentioned. It's a pretty funny story. I think you'll like it. Otherwise, thank you for watching and for being here. If you don't know, I do history videos here where I talk about the history of business and technology and how that kind of affects the world we live in today. And I think that there are a lot of ways that our world comes from this world. And I finally appreciate corn a little more than I used to.